Patrick, it's great to see you. This was a brilliant column, and you're very much on the same page as me, I think, which is that really the government only has one solution now. They have to set up offshore processing if they want to have any hope of getting a handle on this crisis.
Good evening, Dan. Yeah, I think that's right. I think more properly you could say there are two potential solutions. One is to persuade France to guarantee to take back every migrant, and good luck.
Not going to happen, though, is it? Exactly, not going to happen.
Or there's the solution that's within the control of the British government, which is to set up an offshore processing centre, move to standard offshore processing, so the people who come across barely set foot on British mainland soil, and it breaks the business model of the people smugglers. Who's going to pay £3,000 to a people trafficker if you end up as far away from the British mainland as you started? But in order to do that, Boris Johnson in particular needs a lot of political courage, because it means facing down the liberal establishment once again. And I rather doubt that he's either got that courage or presently got the grasp of the detail that he would need.
But Patrick, I had Nigel Farage on earlier. He's saying if it comes down to it, he would consider going back on the front line of British politics to give Boris that kick up the backside he needs to sort this out. I mean, that's not going to be ignored in Number 10, is it?
No, I think they are terrified of a rampant Nigel Farage back in politics. To be honest, they're scared enough of him in his present incarnation on GBNews, where he's obviously been pushing this story since joining the channel. Yep. And by the way, great congratulations to GBNews for everyone making this a story, because it reflects the views of the British people, and we've seen most of the other media organisations ignore it, particularly most of the other broadcasters. They can't do that now, and the latest YouGov issues tracker, for instance, shows that among conservative-leaning or Leave voters, this issue is now the red-hot number one issue of the moment. But as I say, it needs the Prime Minister to grasp this. Now, for instance, we're told that a few months ago they had a sort of recce of Ascension Island as a potential offshore processing centre, but said it wasn't practical. This was the Home Office. Now, who thinks Boris Johnson, if questioned on that by a journalist tomorrow, would be able to explain why it was deemed impractical, would know the detail, would know whether you basically had Guardian reading Home Office officials pulling the wool over his eyes, or whether there was a genuine block on that? I don't believe he would. And I think on this issue, above all others, you've got to be across the detail. You've got to know that perhaps you've got to rip up a few international conventions, the 1951 Refugee Convention, the jurisdiction of the European Court of Human Rights potentially changes to the Human Rights Act. There's a more recent UN migration compact too. Now, he should be across the detail. Which of those international arrangements need changing? Is he going to back Priti Patel, the much maligned Priti Patel, who's overpromised and underdelivered for nearly 2 years now? Or isn't he going to back her? Because all these other policies, the idea of pushing back tiny dinghies in the world's busiest shipping lane, or somehow paying France money to stop the migrants travelling, or appointing a clandestine channel threat commander who's so clandestine we never see him. None of this other stuff is going to work. The question is for the Prime Minister, are you brave enough to move to offshore processing?
Of course. And when Australia was brave enough, Patrick, and it was controversial and the lefties didn't like it, but when Australia was brave enough to move to offshore processing, initially in Papua New Guinea, later to Nauru, it literally stopped the boats. I mean, literally, within 2 years, there were no boats. We've got to do it.
Absolutely. And we've got to do it. And it saved many lives, of course.
Yes, it did.
That much bigger crossing that was going on. And we know lives are being lost. So when people say, oh, it's going to cost a lot of money to house, say, migrants in South Georgia or part of the Falklands or wherever we might choose, well, it won't. We'll only need a couple of plane loads, and the message will go back down the line, and nobody will pay the people smugglers anymore. It will stop it stone dead in its tracks. But the British people have been palmed off for long enough. I think this is becoming an existential issue for the Conservatives.
It is.
And
I think it's a national emergency
if
now.
Nigel
It's
came back,
emergency.
they'd be in trouble.
Yep, and it's a national emergency. We will keep talking about it, of course, on GB News, as we have been doing since launch.